This is a joint event between Prairie Conservation Action Plan, Prairie Wind and Silver Sage, and Nature Saskatchewan. So it's really cool when these partners in conservation can come together. My name is Caitlin, by the way, and I'm the Stewardship Coordinator with Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP. And this is part of our monthly Native Prairie Speaker Series. So every month we do a presentation either in person or in the form of a webinar about anything related to prairie conservation or species at risk. Just to make a note, stay tuned for some of our upcoming Native Prairie Speaker Series. We have a couple of webinars which can be watched from anywhere in Saskatchewan or Canada. On June 20th, Carrie Hecker from Environment and Climate Change Canada will be talking about piping plover critical habitat on Last Mountain Lake National Wildlife Area, and that's Tuesday, June 20th at noon. Or on June 22nd, Chris Helser, the prairie ecologist, will be talking about insects in his webinar called It's All the Little Things, and that's June 22nd at noon. Both of those webinars are free, and you can just register through the PCAP website or Facebook page. I'd like to take a moment to note that in-kind support for this evening's presentation has been given by Nature Saskatchewan, as well as Prairie Wind and Silver Sage, Friends of the Grasslands. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the Government of Canada and the Federal Department of Environment and Climate Change Canada. I would just like to remind everyone that this presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the PCAP YouTube channel later, so you can pass the link on to anyone who wasn't able to make it today. With that in mind, I'll just ask you to turn your cell phones down or off. And a bit about our presenter. So some of you may know her as Ashley Fortney, or the Snake Girl, as she was known here in Valley years ago. Ashley Vass was born and raised in Regina and has family roots in the Swift Current region. Her best childhood memories revolve around the family centennial farm near Webb or at their cabin on Lac Pelletier. Ashley has 2 science degrees from the University of Regina and has worked with numerous different species, including an honors project studying snakes in Grasslands National Park and the Valley area, and a master's degree studying Richardson ground squirrels. Ashley has always had a passion for wildlife and prairie conservation. She is currently a Habitat Stewardship Coordinator for Nature Saskatchewan's Stewards of Saskatchewan programs and enjoys working with rural landowners to conserve and monitor species at risk and their habitat. Ashley coordinates the Shrubs for Shrikes, Plovers on Shore, and Stewards of Saskatchewan banner programs for all other species at risk. So I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Great. Okay, good evening everybody. It's a really good turnout, so thanks everyone for coming to see my talk tonight. And thanks so much PCAP for having me tonight. As Caitlin just mentioned, my name is Ashley Voss and I'm a Habitat Stewardship Coordinator with Nature Saskatchewan. And I'm looking forward to sharing everything I know about butcher birds tonight and the Stewards of Saskatchewan program that works to conserve this species. I'm just going to start by giving a brief overview of what Nature Saskatchewan is for some of you who may not be familiar with our organization. So Nature Saskatchewan is a non-government charitable conservation organization. We're a member-based organization, so we currently have about 700 members, and we're locally affiliated with 16 nature societies. We're also nationally affiliated with Nature Canada. We're Saskatchewan's largest volunteer-driven, non-profit naturalist organization, and for almost 70 years now actually, we've been working to conserve, protect, and document Saskatchewan's sort of natural flora and fauna. So Nature Saskatchewan's vision, or basically our idealized way of how we want the world to be in the future, is humanity in harmony with nature. And our mission, or purpose, basically this is what we do to try to achieve our vision, is to engage and inspire people to appreciate, learn about, and protect Saskatchewan's natural environment. Just to give you a really brief history on our organization, we were founded in 1949. Initially, Nature Sask sought to conserve Saskatchewan's natural resources via lobbying, so asking its membership to lobby governments and other agencies on particular environmental issues. It wasn't until about the 1980s when we really began to start supporting research, and mostly on species at risk, like swift fox, piping plovers, and burrowing owls. One of our longest running stewardship programs actually stemmed from a study that was done in the 80s that showed a marked decline in burrowing owl populations. Also, a project that a lot of people know us for, and some don't, is our campaign to create a national park in the Grasslands ecoregion. So in the 60s, our membership passed a resolution to lobby the government to create such a park, and today, of course, that's Grasslands National Park. Our organization also contributed funds for land acquisition to start the park. Today we have a lot more different programming, and our advocacy is a lot more limited, but we are still involved in certain issues like the federal PFRA transfers, wind farm projects, and things like that. So we've gone from having just 2 staff to 7 full-time staff. We have a couple part-time staff, and then during any given year we have between 3 and 8 summer staff, and 2 of them are here tonight, although nobody can see them. Okay, just an overview of some of the services that we offer. So some of you may have heard of the Blue Jay before. We also had a newsletter called Nature Views, but we've now combined them. The Blue Jay has been published since 1942, so it's a long-running journal publication, and it really sort of contains information on data, species, articles, bird count data, things like that, but it also contains like artwork, poetry, just unusual observations from your backyard. So we really try to cover all audiences with this, and this is a quarterly publication that if you become a member of Nature Sask, you'll receive this. We also have a lot of special publications, so you can see there's just a list or some of the books that we sell. Things like the Flora of Saskatchewan, some field guides like dragonflies and damselflies, lichens of Saskatchewan. So we publish those books and sell them as well if anyone's interested. That's all on our website. Another way that we support research and students is through our Margaret Skeel Graduate Scholarship. So we provide a scholarship once a year to students that are doing research on projects that aligns with Nature Saskatchewan's goals. And then lastly, we own or lease 6 nature sanctuaries in the province. And we also give field tours, and twice a year the members get all of this information about these meets that we have, and we meet in the spring and in the fall. And for example, just about a week ago we had a meet up at Canada Lake, and people went canoeing and learned about bats and had a really great time. Okay, so at Nature Sask we have a lot of different programming, so I've listed a whole bunch of them here, and I'm going to talk about them just really briefly. So if you want more information, go to our website or give us a call. So first of all, LMBO, that's the Last Mountain Bird Observatory. So Nature Saskatchewan runs the Last Mountain Bird Observatory at Last Mountain Lake, and this is open to the public. School groups come out, and what they do there is during the spring and fall migrations, so in May and then September, August and September, they'll mist net for birds, and we have bird banders out there that band the birds, and everybody can come and watch and get involved that way. We also coordinate IBA volunteer network. So IBA stands for the Important Bird Areas, and there's over 50 in the province. There's of course a lot more than 50 important bird areas in the province, but these are just these designated areas because of the status of certain species that come through, or the numbers of different species that come through. And the volunteers go out and monitor for the birds. They'll check for threats or invasive species, other types of risks, things like that. IPPC is the International Piping Plover Census. So of course this, as I said, is an international thing. Nature Saskatchewan just coordinates the Saskatchewan portion. And what they do is they go to all the basins that have suitable habitat for piping plovers, and we try to count all the piping plovers in North America. And so in Saskatchewan, Nature Sask coordinated the last census was last year, and it involved over 100 volunteers that went out and monitored or surveyed for these birds. Inner Nature and Nature Quest are more of our sort of boreal ecoregion or northern programming. Inner Nature, we do unique film screenings of a Cree elder named Jim Seti to school groups, and they learn all about how he was connected with nature. And then Nature Quest is sort of more creative and storytelling, and again, it's based in the boreal ecoregion. Then we have some citizen science programs, so we like to get just anybody involved in science or contributing data to help the environment. So one of those programs is called Nature Watch, and it's actually got 4 sub-programs, so I don't know if anyone's heard of these, but Plant Watch, Ice Watch, Worm Watch, or Frog Watch. And so for Ice Watch, for example, you can record the date of ice off on your lake. And or Plant Watch, you know, you pick a flower, even a dandelion, something like that, and they'll record the first bloom time of that flower for the year. And then we can monitor that over the years and see if we're noticing any climate change trends or anything like that. And then lastly is where I work. So the Stewards of Saskatchewan programs, that's my area of expertise. So the Stewards of Saskatchewan is a suite of 5 voluntary stewardship programs. I mentioned previously our longest program is Operation Burrowing Owl. It's actually one of the longest running stewardship programs in Canada. And it was initiated in 1987. So for those of you who are really at math, that's 30 years ago. So we're having our 30th anniversary this year. And we're going to have a big shindig in Regina, so keep your eyes peeled for ads for that. Then the other 4 programs, Rare Plant Rescue, Shrubs for Shrikes, which I'll touch on at the end of the talk today, Plovers on Shore, and then a program that encompasses sort of all other species at risk. So if people want to join a volunteer stewardship program, don't have any of our target species, that's where they fit in. These programs use target species at risk as conservation ambassadors to sort of be the flagship for habitat conservation. But of course, the overall goal is just prairie conservation for all species that rely on native prairie. So some of our target species, as you could probably guess from the names of the programs, is the burrowing owl, the piping plover, a series of about 16 actually provincially rare or endangered plants, and then lastly the bird of the hour, the Loggerhead Shrike, or the butcher bird. So now we're going to talk all about butcher birds. Okay, so I'm going to start with some ID, how to tell that it's a butcher bird, go over some similar species. I'll go into the biology, so the habitat, the food that they prefer. We'll go over some of the life cycle of the bird, as well as population status and threats and things like that. So hopefully by the end of the talk, you're going to know more than you ever wanted to know about Loggerhead Shrikes. Okay, so first of all, why is it called a Loggerhead Shrike? Its name actually is significant. So loggerhead means blockhead, and this bird actually has a relatively large head when compared with the rest of its body when you look at shrikes versus other birds. Shrike is because it gives off this high-pitched shriek, sort of an alarm call, and I have it queued up here. So they are a songbird, and they make little songbird peeps and things like that, but this is their beautiful okay, so wonderful. Now you got a shrike. So that's why they're called the Loggerhead Shrike. And their other names include butcher bird, bandit bird, and thorn bird. Bandit bird comes from this mask that they have over their eye, reminds people of a bandit. And then butcher bird and thorn bird come from this feeding behavior that they have, and I'll talk all about that in a minute. So now let's talk about what does a Loggerhead Shrike look like? How do I know that I've seen one? So they're not a very big bird. They're slightly smaller than a robin, about 9 inches length, 12-inch wingspan, and pretty light, so 48 grams. If you look at the pictures here, this is a Loggerhead Shrike just on a regular sign, so you can kind of judge the size. And then a picture of a Loggerhead Shrike next to a mourning dove. So you can see they're not very big. Some of you can see, but they're not very big. They have a gray back, a white chest. Some other distinguishing features are that they have a hooked beak, although it can be difficult to see. That picture shows it pretty good. They have that black eye mask that I mentioned before. It's quite thick and obvious. And then they have a black and white wings and tail. Another interesting feature is that males and females, and even juveniles, can look very similar, or do look very similar. So I just put up some pictures so you guys can really just burn that into your brain and let me know if you see any Loggerhead Shrikes out there. This is how you usually see them, so again it's hard to tell that they have that hooked beak. The eye mask is super obvious, and the black and white wings and tail may not always be very obvious. But I've got some pictures where they have their tail more fanned out, and you can really see the white on the edges that comes towards the center of their tail. When they're in flight, it's really obvious to see the white wing patches on their wings, obviously, and then their tail as well. So here's a sketch. So those white wing patches are really obvious in flight. It's hard to get a picture of a loggerhead shrike in flight, okay? But this is what we got, and you can see some white wing patches there. They also do like a flutter coast pattern when they fly. Okay, so people call me when they see loggerhead shrikes, and a lot of times they can be confused with other species, so it's important to keep in mind. I'm going to show you 3 species that are often misidentified as loggerhead shrikes. When you look at the picture, I mean, you say to yourself, how could somebody think that's a loggerhead shrike, right? But when you're seeing them just quickly out in the field, it can be tricky. So the eastern kingbird is the first bird that gets confused with a shrike, and they're different because they have a very dark gray and almost black on their entire back. They have a full head cap. They do have white underneath like a shrike, but they don't have a hooked beak. The eye mask is obviously not there, and then their tail has a full white tip. There, actually I should remember to turn mine off after I played that song. The next bird that's often confused with the loggerhead shrike is a western kingbird. And the thing about the western kingbirds is that they have this dark eye streak, and sometimes it does look a little bit like an eye mask. But their gray back is a little more olive gray. They do have a dark tail as well, like a shrike does, but underneath they're all yellow. So the easiest way to tell if it's not a shrike is if it's yellow underneath. Okay, and then lastly, this bird really looks like a loggerhead shrike. So this is the easiest one to confuse. This is a northern shrike. The 2 pictures on the left are a northern shrike, and the picture on the right is a loggerhead shrike. I chose these pictures strategically because of the lighting. It's really easy to tell the difference, but you can see with this bird here, sometimes it's not very easy to tell the difference. So the northern shrike is slightly larger. It has a bit of brown barring on its chest. It also has a larger bill and a more prominent hooked beak. But the best way to tell is the eye mask, first of all. So the northern shrike's eye mask is more sparse. It only covers about half the eye, where you can see the loggerhead shrike eye mask covers the full eye, and it's full to the beak. So that's one of the best ways to tell. But barring all of that, the way to tell if it's a northern shrike or a loggerhead shrike is just by looking at your calendar. So northern shrikes breed up north of here, so in northern Canada. Loggerhead shrikes breed here. And then in the winter, the northern shrikes migrate down, and the loggerhead shrikes migrate down as well, so they leave as the northern shrikes are coming. So you'll get a little bit of overlap in March, as well as in maybe September, October. But besides that, the best rule of thumb is that if it's April to September, it's a loggerhead shrike, and if it's October to March, it's a northern shrike. Makes it easy. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about habitat now, and I'll just start with this nice visual sketch made by Heather Peatham. So this is just the basics on loggerhead shrike habitat. They prefer open grasslands with scattered shrubs and trees. They prefer to nest in thorny shrubs that are about 1 meter or 2 high. They hunt from perches on prominent dead branches, poles, abandoned buildings, anything with good eye lines. They also avoid heavily grazed sites, and it's mainly just due to a lack of prey in these areas. So they like things like ungrazed, lightly grazed areas, riparian zones, ditches, and that sort of thing. So I said they prefer thorny shrubs. Some examples of those is buffaloberry on the left or hawthorn on the right. And that's because these are nice, dense shrubs. There's a lot of foliage, but mostly they have thorns. And I said before they're called a thorn bird, and I'll talk in just a minute about why they love thorns. But first we'll finish up on what types of habitat. So they do prefer open areas for hunting, like open grasslands, or even if there's cultivated fields, as long as there's prey sources available and they have that the sight lines. And I said they nest in thorny shrubs, but with settlement on the prairies. We converted a lot of native grasslands into agricultural lands, and a lot of shelterbelts were built up between the fields as well as around houses. And so things like even spruce, shelterbelts, carigana, like that became very available for these loggerhead shrikes. So you will often find them nesting in shelterbelts and dense trees, things like that. So yeah, they're often going to be found around farmyards, whether they're occupied or abandoned. They're not shy from nesting in an occupied farmyard. Abandoned farmyards are really great for them. Same as cemeteries and golf courses, just because there's almost always the trees there. There's variability in the vegetation heights. There's usually a good prey source, especially at abandoned buildings. There's always mice living in the buildings, or if there's old grain bins around, it really provides the food that they need. But yeah, cemeteries is kind of weird, but you find shrikes in cemeteries a lot. And I think maybe because it's a little bit quiet and they have some places to perch on. Kind of spooky because they're the butcher bird and they're found in cemeteries. So yeah, shrubs, trees and shelterbelts. So you can find them in native areas like native pasture with some scrub and some trees. You can also find them in tame grasslands as well as I mentioned before, croplands. So they like shelterbelts and dense bushes. They like a variety of different vegetation heights. So if there's a herbaceous strip of vegetation between crop types, they like that. And they really like dead branches or good perching spots. Oh yeah, I mentioned previously that the abandoned farmsteads are also really good places to find loggerhead shrikes. So we encourage people to leave these buildings up. I know that it's also a place for like hawks to perch, or it's maybe sometimes the species at risk best management practices can conflict with each other. Things that are good for shrikes, like not grazing to the ground, may not be good for burrowing owls who love it super short. But yeah, shrikes love these abandoned farmsteads. And here's a picture of a loggerhead shrike. He's on a gravestone. Like I said, this is really common. You'll find them in cemeteries a lot, perched on gravestones or crosses. And they like to perch up high because they're a sit and wait predator. So they'll sit there and they'll just surveil until they find something that they can go after. So you will find them perched on utility wires, barbed wire fences, tips of branches, and especially dead branches. So these are really the best places to look for loggerhead shrikes, is kind of at the tips or on the fence lines. So the coolest thing about loggerhead shrikes is that they're often described as a songbird that eats like a hawk, because they have this really neat feeding behavior. So other birds this size are going to eat things like, insects only, or seeds, or just small prey like that. The loggerhead shrikes can take a wide variety of prey. So the majority of their diet is grasshoppers, but they'll also take things like mice, voles, amphibians, snakes. They even sometimes eat small birds, although it's a really small part of their diet. But just picture this tiny little bird taking another bird. Like, it's really interesting. They can take prey that's up to 130% of their own body size, and they can't carry it far. They'll maybe just carry it in short bursts. But the reason why people say that they eat like a hawk is because they take these large food items, but they can't actually hang on to it like a hawk can. So hawks have really strong talons. They'll hang on to their prey, they'll rip chunks off, and they're really good at dealing with that. But the loggerhead shrikes have found an alternative. So if they have a really big heavy mouth, they'll actually carry it up over to a fence, some barbed wire or a thorn or something, and they actually impale it onto the thorn or the wire, and then they just sit beside it and they rip chunks off. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen, snakes or anything hanging on a fence. The first time I saw that, I thought, wow, like this landowner hates snakes. Trying to ward off all the other snakes in the yard. But no, it turns out that isn't just a natural thing, and loggerhead shrikes do it. So not only will they impale prey, but sometimes they even just wedge it in the Y of a branch or the crook of a branch in order to fix it there. So, I should warn you, we're going to go over some impalement pictures now, so it might be a little gory if there are children in the room. So the first one here is a meadow vole. So you can see here that the shrike has actually stabbed that vole right onto a thorn, and it's just hanging there. There's some snakes. Unfortunately, I think this snake on the right is still alive because it looks like it's wrapped itself around the wire. Here's a frog and an insect. Yeah, it's pretty neat, right? So yeah, most of their diet is insects. So yeah, grasshoppers, bees, frogs. Yeah, frogs aren't insects, but all sorts of a big variety. And here, it's kind of blurry, I know, but it was the only picture I had where something was actually wedged into some branches. So it's a headless bird, so it's just wedged right in there. This next one I think is a goodie. Okay, so there's a house sparrow. So it's a house sparrow, if that makes anyone feel better. But anyways, and then again, I just have one more head picture. So, but this one's really interesting, this one, because it's like a Richardson's. I'm pretty sure it's a Richardson's ground squirrel. That's what I did my master's on. And they're big, right? I think my guess for what happened here is that the shrike was scavenging some roadkill and probably just found the head and impaled the head. Okay, so enough about that. Coolest thing ever. So now I'm going to go all through the life cycle, and we'll just alternate between some information and some pictures. So Loggerhead Shrikes get here in Saskatchewan in April to early May. They're a migratory bird, so when they get here, the males set up a territory and they'll attract females by singing, but also by impaling prey. So they'll sort of get as many as they can around and show that I'm a really good provider. Yeah, it's pretty cool. They often use the same territory every year, and it can vary between 6 hectares or 15 acres to just over 60 acres. Both the male and the female construct the nest, and this happens around mid-May. It's about 15 centimeters in diameter. It's bulky, cup-shaped like most nests. It's made of twigs, flowering plants, grass, and they'll even use cattle and horsehair. It's woven really tightly to keep the elements out. Usually built at about chest height. It can be higher though. And it's strongly defended by both of the eyes. So I just got some pictures now to show you what the nest looks like. So there's a twiggy nest and some shrubs. This nest, I think everyone can see it's quite reddish around the brim and on the inside, so they've woven a lot of horsehair into this nest. So that would be nice and soft, I think. They also nest in some fairly unusual places. So we've had reports of nests in just a pile of tumbleweeds, piles of branches like this. One of our participants even had a shrike nest more than once in just a giant pile of barbed wire that he had taken from a fence that he'd taken down and piled up. So, pretty cool. Yeah, the females lay about 5 to 8 eggs. That happens in late May. They lay them just 1 egg per day, and they're sort of a grayish, creamy color. They have a lot of dark speckling near the large end, and then less as you get towards the tip. And the female incubates the eggs for just over 2 weeks, and the male feeds her during that time. So here's just one picture of some eggs, and they're kind of like a grayish cream color. You can see there's a lot more speckling on the large end, and then it sort of just peters out towards the tip of the egg. Chicks hatch around mid-June, so they should be hatching pretty soon here. The female broods them for less than a week, but the nestling period lasts for 2 to 3 weeks. At this time, the parents are feeding the young continuously, so it's actually a really good time to see adult loggerhead shrikes because they're going back and forth, food to nest to food to nest. And yeah, they're a great form of natural pest control, so they eat a lot of grasshoppers and insects. There was a study that timed a nest location, and over just 1 hour, an adult brought a grasshopper to the nest every 4 minutes. So if you think about the entire time that they're feeding their chicks, that can get rid of a lot of grasshoppers. So some pictures, we've got some chicks hatching out of the eggs here, featherless and closed eyes as usual. Here they're getting their feathers, their eyes are open, looking kind of cute, begging for food, as they will do continuously, pretty much. And this is my favorite picture of shrike chicks. Don't you just want to scratch their chins? They look kind of like, I don't know, really wrinkled old people. But Very neat. So yeah, then even after the chicks leave the nest, the parents continue to feed them. The chicks grow really fast as well. In about 2 weeks, they go from being like 3 grams to about 45 grams. So I know it's still a small number, but it's about 15 times their size. So they're almost the size of the adults. And then the family group remains together for about 2 weeks after flooding. So I've got some pictures of some chicks now out of the nest, but still begging for food. And I just want to say that the people that contribute photos to us are amazing. So we didn't even take these. These were our participants or members. And so they're really great pictures. And you can see the adults. See, they look very similar, but the adults probably obvious on all of these. The chicks, as I said, they do look a lot like the adults. The coloring is all the same. But you can tell it's a chick because they look kind of like they have some baby fat. They're kind of fluffy. And then they have a really obviously shorter tail. So that's the best way to tell. A lot of times the eye mask is a little patchier. The beak might have a bit of yellow still. But the tail is a dead giveaway. But once they start to get a little older, it can be really difficult to tell the difference between juveniles and adults. They don't actually learn to drive until after their first year, so they just have to stay in the passenger seat until then. Isn't that cool? Participant sent that to me, so Shrike just flew right into his truck. That's not normal. Don't look for them in your truck. Okay, so now we'll just talk about migration when they leave. So they leave Saskatchewan around the beginning of September. They're solitary during migration. And they can fly really far up, down all the way to Mexico, so about 3,000 kilometers to their wintering grounds. And I have a map here. So the red part is solely wintering grounds, so it's southern Texas and in Mexico. The blue shows where you can find shrikes year-round, so just in the United States, southern part of